What's going on, guys? And for the OGs of this channel, you guys are definitely gonna remember this series or this style of series. Basically, this was like a type of video that I used to make where I literally just sit down, talk with you guys for a bit, throw some gameplay on the screen, and just, go back in time and look at some nostalgic games, some underrated games, some hidden gems, and everything in between. And today, specifically, we're gonna be looking at 5 licensed games on the PS2. It is worth noting that some of these games are also available on things like the GameCube or the original Xbox or have been remastered, but just to keep things simple, we're just gonna be specifically looking at the PS2 versions of these games. Now, these games aren't in any particular order or anything like that. I just kind of had these written down in whatever order I thought of them in. And there were so many that I wanted to include in this video, but I'll save those for a second video if you guys end up enjoying this one. First things first, we're going to start with The Godfather, the game. Where do I even begin with this game? So this is essentially based off of the first movie, and it is worth noting that there is a sequel to this game, The Godfather 2, on Xbox 360 and PS3, and I believe there was a PC version, but it obviously has since been delisted since it's like a licensed property. So if you want to find that game, I'd highly recommend just going to eBay or Mercari or something like that on the 360 or PS3. But anyway, going back to The Godfather, the game. Again, this is based off of the first movie. I would say loosely, but I mean, it does follow it pretty closely. One of the things that I love about this game is that, during this story, when you're hitting these certain plot points, instead of certain characters taking out certain tasks, your character that you created is the one that actually plants the pistol there. And then at another point in the game, you're the one that plants like the horse. Well, not your character specifically, but you help another character plant the horse head in the bed. I'm gonna try not to go too deep with like character names and stuff because I know that stuff can kind of be considered spoilers. But a lot of those like important moments from the movie, I would say like all the important moments and plot points and iconic moments from the movie are definitely all here and pretty faithfully recreated or, but have like a slight twist put on them in the game. That's not to mention all the other cool gameplay mechanics, like you have the whole like business and racketeering side of things where there's businesses all over this game's map, and basically there's 4 families in the game. Well, technically 5 in total if you count your family, the Corleones, but there's 4 other families in the game, and each family is going to be running different businesses, and what you try to do is you try to go in, extort all these different businesses, take them from the other families, which then leads to later in the game where you can go and take out like their compounds, which then once you take out their compounds, well, they're no longer a threat, and once you take out all the other 4 families, then you're the Don of NYC. That's more or less endgame stuff though. Like, you can complete the main story of the game without becoming Don, but if you complete the game and you complete the story and you're looking for a little bit more, well then that's another fun thing that you could go and take on. Not to mention the fact that I'm just a sucker for this time period. I've always loved like mafia and mob stories, you got the suits and the Tommy guns and stuff. It's just, man, I love stuff like that. That's one of the many reasons that I also love the Mafia trilogy, which, man, those games are absolutely amazing. If you haven't played those, Mafia Definitive Edition, and then Mafia 2 also got a Definitive Edition a bit ago, and Mafia 3, those are all just amazing games right there. I could go on and on about this game. I absolutely love it. It's super nostalgic for me, but yeah, if you haven't played it before, I highly recommend it. It's available on like Wii, PS2, original Xbox, Xbox 360, PS, it's all over the place. So, if you don't have a PS2, you can still find other ways to play it. Next up, we got SpongeBob SquarePants, the movie game. Now, obviously when it comes to licensed games, I could have easily talked about Battle for Bikini Bottom, but I really do feel like the movie game just isn't talked about or represented enough, so that's why we're talking about it here today. Basically, the movie game is like the unofficial sequel to Battle for Bikini Bottom. A lot of the things that you saw or did in Battle for Bikini Bottom, you're going to be doing here. One thing I will say is that there's not as many playable characters, but that obviously makes sense with the plot of the movie. You're only going to be playing as SpongeBob or Patrick in a given thing. And one other thing I will note, well, actually, before we get to the negatives, let's just go over all the positives, okay? So again, you're going to be doing a lot of the stuff that you're going to be doing in Battle for Bikini Bottom, except this one, rather than being like a semi-open hub world type of thing, this is more of a linear game, more of a level-based thing. But, and this is one of the things that kind of ties into one of the negatives, you can kind of like go back and go to any of the levels at any point and take on certain challenges, sort of like you would in Battle for Bikini Bottom. But that's kind of where one of the negatives comes in, and really my only negative with this game is that it's one of those licensed games where it's going to force you to repeat content towards the end of the game, where it's like, hey, you don't have enough golden spatulas, and now we need you to go back and do a bunch of these challenges in the previous levels in order to get enough to, progress through the game story, which honestly isn't that big of a deal because there was sort of like that same thing at play in Battle for Bikini Bottom. It feels like especially apparent in this game, but it's not like you necessarily have to 100% the game to beat it or anything like that, but you do have to come pretty close. I'm pretty sure it's like a solid 70 to 80% that you got to get through. And again, for some people that might be a little annoying if you just want to see the story and you get the game over with, but for others like completionists, that's not going to be a big deal anyway. For me personally, it wasn't that big of an annoyance. It literally only added like, I don't know, maybe like an extra hour onto the game because, you do earn a lot of the things that you need to keep progressing through the story just as you naturally play. There was only like a couple of instances where I had to go back and go out of my way to actually get those things. So even if even if it sounds bad, it really isn't that bad at all. Otherwise, this is literally everything that that you love from Battle for Bikini Bottom and just more of it. Like, it's an absolutely amazing game, and it's a shame that not as many people talk about this one, because this really was like the unofficial sequel to Battle for Bikini Bottom before we got the Cosmic Shake. This is another one that's available on multiple platforms, so if you haven't tried it before, just, you know, if you have any of the platforms that it's available on, I can highly recommend it. It's so much fun. Next up, we got Batman Begins, or what I like to call Arkham Before Arkham. So, where do I even begin with this game? This obviously follows the plot pretty faithfully-ish. There is a couple of deviations, but it does hit a lot of the plot points in the movie, considering that it does actually use clips from the movie inside of the game. Again, this is basically Arkham Before Arkham. Obviously, it doesn't have the Arkham-style combat, but when it comes to, like, stealth and level progression and some of the things that you see here, you really see how this game kind of, in a way, planted the seeds for Arkham Asylum. It's just astonishing to me how little people actually know about this game. Like, a lot of people that I've talked to, very few of them have actually known about this game or played this game or even seen it or heard about it before. It is honestly great, and when you look at the graphics at the time, like, it looks like an early 360, early PS3 game. Like, you know, I was actually pretty shocked to find out, oh, this was, like, only for 6th-gen consoles. The combat is pretty fun and pretty satisfying. The animations can be a little floaty looking at times. They're not necessarily enough to take you out of the experience, but they do look a little floaty compared to, like, Arkham Asylum, where, like, every animation and every sound effect, you can almost feel that fizz going through that goon's face. But still, the combat's satisfying. They give you a lot of cool tools, you know, in Batman's arsenal to mess around with and use to progress through the levels and solve certain puzzles. So, well, there's not really that many puzzles. I mean, there's like a couple puzzle-esque things to get through the environments, but it's not that puzzle-heavy of a game. There's barely any, and even for the ones that there kind of are, they're not actual puzzles. They're more like traversal puzzles, I guess, if you could even call them that, and they're not complicated. You're not gonna get stuck on anything if you're bad at puzzles like I am. Not to mention the 2 Batmobile sections in the game, which are literally just Burnout, but in Batman, like, you're literally using the Batmobile, but you have, like, the same boost and takedown mechanics as, like, Burnout Revenge, which, let me just say, that's, like, a whole other thing. Maybe I can make a video on, like, racing games I need to come back, because I'm telling you right now, the whole Burnout series, that would be top of the list. Please give me a Burnout Dominator remake where we get every single version of Avril Lavigne's girlfriend back in the game. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, in the game Burnout Dominator, there's literally, like, every language version of Avril Lavigne's girlfriend in the game. You got, like, Japanese, Spanish, English. I don't know why, but I mean, hey, all of them still sound great regardless. Anyways, yeah, Batman Begins, again, the gameplay is great. The Batmobile sections are probably, honestly, debatably, maybe even my favorite parts of the game. And then you got, like, the boss battles in the game, which are all pretty fun. Again, none of them are too difficult, but it's just cool facing off against those movie villains in game. And yeah, if you haven't played this one before, it's still pretty cheap. You can get on, like, original Xbox, PS2, all that. So, yeah, another one that I highly recommend, obviously, since it's in this video. Next up, we got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 2003 game that is based off of, you know, the 2003 cartoon, which, let me just say, a lot of nostalgia there. Grew up on that one. To put it in the simplest of terms, this is a 3D brawler, and while this may look like, you know, somewhat generic or simple, and, you know, I know some games that are similar to this that get some criticism would be like Batman Rise of Sinzu or Spider-Man Friend or Foe, where it's like, it's just these button-mashy 3D brawlers, but I promise, Turtles, this game is sort of like Turtles in Time in 3D, to where it looks simple on its surface, but there is a lot of depth to the game. There's a lot of mechanics that you gotta grasp and learn, and honestly, it is so much fun, and it gets to be surprisingly challenging at certain points. Me personally, when I play the game, I go with Michelangelo. That's just the one that I've always went with when I play this game. There's just something about his moveset. It just, the whole eat feet, eat feet, eat feet. If you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. When you're facing off against the 2 mouse robots at the end, you just spam the same move with the twirling nunchucks and the feet going, eat feet, eat feet, eat feet. This is another one of those games that actually includes clips from the show as well to, like, string everything together. Gosh, I can't even speak English. This entire game is basically based off of a good portion of Season 1, not the entirety of Season 1, but a good portion of it, and again, it's going to be stringing you along with actual clips from the show, so it stays pretty close to the show's storyline. It only deviates ever so slightly, and even when it does, it finds its way back to the show pretty quickly. There's a bit of a combo system going, so for most of the game, you're probably just going to be mashing A or X just to kind of do, like, the basic combos, but then you can do this thing where, like, you know, you hit X a couple of times and you hit square. Sometimes you'll do an X square to stun an enemy, sometimes you do an XX square to do, like, a whole ground thing, or the whole, like, area of effect and knock all the enemies away. Sometimes you'll do a XXX square, so then you can hit him a couple of times and hit him with, like, a nunchuck spin, and then other times you're going to be, like, spamming L2 to dodge out of the way. For some bosses, you'll want to go up and hit them as much as you can. For some enemies, you want to do, like, you know, the whole area of effect thing. For some, they're really quick, so you just want to hit them with the XXX and get moving to the next guy. For some bosses, sometimes you might not even want to fight them. Sometimes you might want to dash away and spam them with the fire stars. And another cool thing is that no matter which turtle you choose, because obviously you can choose between any of the turtles, or if you have cheat codes, you know, you can play as other characters like Splinter. While not each each campaign is 100% unique. Each turtle does actually have like unique levels or unique bosses to each one. Like if you play as Raphael, for example, you can face off against Casey Jones. And that doesn't happen if you play as any of the other turtles. And there's like unique things for, like that for each of the turtles. So it is actually worth going through and playing as each of the turtles. And the game really isn't that long. It can take you anywhere from 3 to 8 hours. It just depends on how good or bad you are, really. I don't want to go too much more in depth about this game, but yeah, if you have any nostalgia for the 2003 show like I do, just, you know, even seeing the cartoon clips in game is enough for me to this day to just get on and be like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm like playing inside of the show, but it's the game, and it's just... there's also 2 sequels to this game. You got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 Battle Nexus, as well as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Mutant Mayhem. All 3 of these are absolutely amazing games, and there's also like other versions of them. Like you got the GBA versions, which are literally just like Turtles in Time type games, except on GBA. They're like completely different. They're 2D beat 'em ups, but they're absolutely amazing as well. If you haven't played any of these games before, please do yourself a favor and pick them up and try. And for the final game of the day, we have Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. For anybody that anybody that knows me knows I love Star Wars, and you probably already knew that this was coming, but man, Star Wars Episode 3, this is one of the most, like, low-key, underrated Star Wars games, which is really, like, odd when you think about it, because it's based on one of, like, you know, the movies. There's a couple of reasons that I love this game so much, so we'll just kind of try to pinpoint it. Like, it's so hard for me to talk about some of these games because there's so much at play that I feel like my brain is just becoming, like, jello as I'm talking about it, because there's so many things that I want to touch on, but I also don't want to spoil things. So first off, the story. The story literally follows the movie, basically beat for beat. You're going to be going through and hitting, like, all of the important things that happens in the movie. And yes, that includes the epic final battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan, which... There's one thing I'll say is where the normal end of the game does follow the normal ending of the movie, but there is an alternate ending that you unlock when you beat the game, and let me just say that it's, like... kind of funny, even though it's not. It's just like you don't expect it to happen, that it kind of catches you off guard. The gameplay in this game is essentially like almost like a God of War type of thing, except with Star Wars. It's not as fast or as like slashy as like God of War or DMC would be, but it's still like it has that same combo system, like square, square, square X or square, square triangle, and you know you're like doing all these different moves and combos and stuff like that to get through the game, and it's very hacky and slashy, but it's not just hacking and slashing. Like there's still like platforming type elements, and like you traversing through the levels and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say a 3D platformer, but it, I just want to say, like beat 'em up action adventure type of game. And obviously it's also got all the iconic music and characters from the movie. And then there's a few other things I want to highlight. Not only do you get these awesome bonus levels after you beat the game, where you can actually play through the, the lightsaber duel between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan from Episode 4 A New Hope, but there is also an insane versus mode where you get to use the, because the lightsabers in this game, I don't want to say it's like, oh, it's so super in-depth, but it kind of is. There is like more than it would seem on the surface. Like when it comes to like combos and blocks and different ways that you can deflect certain attacks or counter certain attacks, and like certain combos you can pull off and how it affects certain enemies and their weaknesses and stuff, like it's surprisingly in-depth, and you get to use all of that in a versus mode where like you and a buddy could just sit down, couch co-op, and slash it out, and it's just, oh man, it is so much fun because you have a great roster of characters to play with, and it's just, I mean, it's absolutely epic. This is one of those things where, like, if kids nowadays love Star Wars and, like, say outside of Battlefront 2, they want another game where it's just like, okay, because, like, Battlefront 2, as much as I love that game, when it comes to lightsaber duels, it mostly does rely on, like, special abilities more than actual, like, lightsaber combos, because when it comes to the combos, obviously, most of the time, you're just kind of slashing RT or R2, depending on your console, and then, you're doing, like, your special abilities to kind of, like, level the playing field. But, like, if you were looking for a game where you wanted to actually rely more on lightsaber skill and combos and stuff like that, I could highly recommend Episode 3, because again, there's like all these different combos and things at play, and it's more based on the lightsaber combat rather than the abilities that come with like the lightsaber and the force abilities. But don't get it twisted, you do still have force abilities, so keep that in mind. Things can get pretty chaotic pretty quick, but Star Wars Episode 3, there's so much that I could say about it, but again, with a lot of these games, it's better that I say less and let you guys experience it for yourself and just kind of give you enough to, hopefully get your foot in the door, get you excited, get you thinking about playing it, maybe, picking it up physically. Again, these games weren't necessarily in any order, but like Star Wars Episode 3, this is definitely one of them where it's like, man, if you haven't played this, you gotta try it at least once. And for anybody interested or curious, it is also backwards compatible on Xbox Series X and Xbox One. So if you have one of those consoles, you don't have any reason not to pick it up, because yes, it is still available digitally and physical copies are very cheap. Anyways, with that, I think that's all my thoughts. I don't know, my brain feels like mush, it feels like jello. I have OCD and ADHD, so when those two things combine, when I'm trying to talk about, things that I love, it gets real crazy real quick. So I hope that this was like somewhat coherent and cohesive, and it was like easy enough to understand, and hopefully enough to help you guys get excited to try out some of these games, or at least consider trying out some of these games. At the very least, I got to put these games on your guys' radar, and you know, that's all that my goal is. That's all that I want to do. But if you guys take it a step further and end up trying these games and falling in love with any of them, then obviously that would make me like super happy. And if you guys end up doing that, please let me know down in the comments, because I would genuinely love to get that conversation going with you guys, because obviously I have a lot of nostalgia for these games. I grew up with these games, but like, you know, if I could just like hear other people's first times playing the games nowadays, or like hearing their experiences falling in love with these games that I've loved for so long, just, I don't know, just few things would make me happier. But again, if you guys enjoyed this style of video, and if you guys would want these kind of videos to return, because I used to do them all the time, just let me know. I would be more than happy to bring these like style of videos back, because I have way more games that I could just sit here and gush about. I'm a wellspring of video game knowledge and history. This is like, in a way, kind of like my life's work. Like, I love video games so much, so like, getting to sit here and gush about games like this, I can literally do this all day, every day. But anyways, always massive shout out, thank you to all the Patreons and channel members. Thank you to all you in the low baller tier, new maker shout out, thank you to all you in the mid baller tier, Mellow asking me, Daddy Manny, the biggest shout out, thanks to all you in the G tier, Run Adventure, Selling Cheese Curl. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.